We know that many of you come to these essays not just to sleep, but because during the day your mind is too full, too noisy. That's why we create these pieces deep enough for you to feel nourished, yet gentle enough for you to let go. Imagine standing at the edge of a quiet lake just before dawn. The world is suspended in that liminal space between darkness and light. Mist rises from the water's surface in slow, curling patterns. The air is cool against your skin. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls. Once then, silence returns. You are alone here, a witness to this threshold moment. The water is perfectly still, not frozen, just resting, waiting. In this stillness, you sense something you've forgotten. Something about trust, about how the world works when you're not trying to make it work. The mist doesn't strain to rise. The dawn doesn't force itself into being. Everything unfolds according to a rhythm you cannot see, but can somehow feel. Feel the ground beneath your feet, solid, patient, holding you without effort. Notice how the earth doesn't try to support you. It simply has done so every moment of your life without once asking for acknowledgement. The stones at the water's edge, worn smooth by thousands of years of waves, tell their own story of surrender. They did not resist the water's touch. They allowed themselves to be shaped, and in that allowing became beautiful. This is psychology for sleep in its deepest form. Not just techniques to quiet the mind, but an invitation to remember something ancient about the nature of trust itself. Not trust as blind faith, but trust as direct perception of how life actually functions when we stop interfering with it. Consider the tree standing near the shore, its roots diving deep into earth you cannot see. It does not worry whether the soil will provide nutrients tomorrow. It does not plan its growth anxiously, checking and rechecking its strategy. It simply extends roots into darkness, trusting that what it needs will be there. And it is. And the tree grows year after year in a patience that would seem miraculous if we hadn't forgotten. This is simply how life works. The spider spinning her web between branches trusts the silk will hold, trusts the geometry she's never studied, trusts the insects will come. She doesn't construct backup plans or contingency webs. She spins from instinct and intelligence, deeper than thought. And she eats and she lives, and the web holds until it doesn't. And then she spins another without drama, without crisis, without the story of failure your mind would create from the same circumstance. Watch how the water receives the first light of dawn. It doesn't reach up toward the sun, doesn't strain or grasp. It simply reflects what arrives perfectly, completely, without trying. This is the teaching the natural world offers in every moment. Trust is not effort, but release. Not grasping, but allowing. Not forcing, but receiving what is already being given. There exists a paradox at the heart of human suffering. The tighter we grip, the more life slips through our fingers like water. The harder we try to control outcomes, the more chaos we create. We exhaust ourselves in the pursuit of certainty when life by its very nature is uncertain. We demand answers from a universe that speaks in mystery. Carl Jung spent his life exploring this paradox. He called it many things: the relationship between ego and self, the process of individuation, the discovery of synchronicity. But beneath all these terms lay a simple truth. We suffer not because life is untrustworthy, but because we've forgotten how to trust. Look around at the modern world. We live in an age of unprecedented anxiety, despite all our technology, all our control systems, all our carefully constructed plans. We sleep less than any generation before us. We wake at 3 in the morning, minds racing with lists and worries and contingencies. We scroll through our phones, searching for something to grasp onto something solid, something certain. The statistics are staggering. Anxiety disorders now affect over 40 million adults in the United States alone. Sleep deprivation has become so common, we treat it as normal, joking about needing coffee to function, wearing exhaustion like a badge of honor. We measure productivity in hours worked rather than wisdom gained in tasks completed rather than presence embodied. We have become collectively a culture of controlled chaos, desperately trying to manage every variable while secretly drowning in the overwhelm. Consider your own day. How many hours did you spend truly present versus how many hours you spent planning the next moment, reviewing the last moment, preparing for future moments that may never arrive? How much energy went into actually living versus how much went into managing, organizing, controlling, preparing, defending? If you're honest and this work requires brutal honesty, you'll recognize that most of your consciousness is spent anywhere but here, anytime but now. We check our phones an average of 96 times per day. Not because 96 important things happened, but because the checking itself is a compulsion, a grasping for something to hold on to in the uncertainty of existence. We refresh our email, our messages, our news feeds, looking for what information that will finally make us feel prepared, enough, certain, enough, safe enough. But that moment never arrives. The more information we consume, the more uncertain we feel, because information without wisdom only multiplies anxiety. At work, we've created cultures of constant availability, where being offline for even a few hours creates anxiety about what we're missing. We attend meetings about meetings, create reports about reports, plan our planning. The original purpose, the actual work, the actual creation, the actual human connection gets buried under layers of management, control, and documentation of control. This is not coincidence. This is the symptom of a deeper disconnection. Jung observed that modern humans suffer from a severance, a cutting off from the unconscious, from the deeper intelligence that guides life when we stop interfering with it. We have become, he said, like people living only in the attic of a great house, never venturing into the rooms below, where wisdom and guidance wait in the darkness. We've confused the map for the territory, the plan for the living, the control for the actual experience of being alive. Our ancestors, for all their genuine hardships, had something we've lost: a lived relationship with uncertainty. They planted seeds without knowing if rain would come. They embarked on journeys without GPS, without weather forecasts, without the illusion of total information. They made decisions with incomplete data, because incomplete data was all anyone ever had. And somehow humanity survived, thrived, created art and philosophy and meaning from lives lived in uncertainty far greater than anything we face. But we've been sold a different story. We've been told that with enough planning, enough information, enough control, we can eliminate uncertainty. We've been promised that anxiety is a solvable problem, rather than a teacher that discomfort is a sign something's wrong, rather than a sign we're alive that not knowing is weakness, rather than the very condition that makes learning possible. The culture we inhabit demands constant vigilance. Stay alert, stay connected, stay productive, make it happen, hustle harder, control your outcomes, optimize every moment. The voice of modern life tells us that if we just plan enough work, enough control enough, we'll finally be safe. But safety is always one more achievement away, one more milestone, one more level of preparation. The goalpost moves because the premise is false control cannot create safety. It can only create the exhaustion of perpetual defense. But you're here now at this hour because you know something is wrong with that story. Your body knows. Your nervous system knows. The exhaustion you feel is not laziness. It's rebellion. It's your deeper self saying, there must be another way. Tonight, we offer you psychology for sleep that goes beyond surface relaxation. We're not here to simply calm you down so you can return tomorrow to the same patterns of grasping and controlling. We're here to invite you into something older, something wiser. The recognition that you are held by an intelligence far greater than your understanding, and that when you learn to trust this intelligence, everything changes. Throughout human history, the greatest teachers have pointed toward this truth. The Stoics called it amor fati, love of fate. They taught that we suffer not from events themselves, but from our resistance to what is. The Taoists spoke of wu wei, effortless action, the art of moving with life rather than against it. Medieval mystics like Meister Eckhart taught the practice of Gelassenheit, letting be releasing the grasping mind. The romantic poet John Keats called it negative capability, the capacity to dwell in uncertainty without anxiously reaching after fact and reason. And Jung, drawing from all these streams of wisdom, taught that the journey of individuation, of becoming who we truly are, requires us to surrender the ego's illusion of control and learn to trust the self, that deeper organizing intelligence within us. This is not passivity. This is not giving up. This is the hardest, bravest work a human being can do, learning to distinguish between the tight, anxious voice of the controlling ego and the quiet, steady voice of deeper wisdom. As you listen now, your body already beginning to soften, your breath already starting to slow. Know that you don't need to grasp onto these words. You don't need to remember everything. You don't need to get this right. This is psychology for sleep, which means it works whether you're listening or drifting, whether you're focused or floating away. We will journey together through 4 explorations tonight. First, we'll understand the psychology of trust, why your nervous system craves it, and what happens when you learn it. Then we'll discover the archetypal patterns of surrender that appear in every culture and mythology, showing you that this struggle is universal and ancient. Third, we'll explore the neuroscience of letting go what actually happens in your brain when you release control. And finally, we'll face the Jungian challenge, the direct invitation to do the work of transformation. But none of this requires effort from you right now. Just listen. Just breathe. Just allow these reflections to wash over you like gentle waves. The lake at dawn doesn't try to be still. The mist doesn't strain to rise. And you don't need to force yourself to trust. You simply need to stop forcing yourself not to. Everything is working out for you, not because you've planned it perfectly, not because you've controlled every variable, but because there is an intelligence in life itself, and when you align with it, rather than fight against it, miracles become ordinary. Let us begin. At its core, trust is not a feeling, but a relationship, a dynamic engagement with uncertainty. This is the first thing to understand about the psychology for sleep we're exploring tonight. Trust is not the same as blind faith, which asks you to believe without evidence. Trust is not the same as denial, which asks you to pretend danger doesn't exist. Trust is the capacity to remain open to life, even when outcomes are uncertain. It is the nervous system's ability to stay present with what is, rather than fleeing into fantasy or collapsing into despair. Psychologists distinguish trust from hope, from optimism, from wishful thinking. Hope says, I believe things will turn out the way I want. Optimism says, good things tend to happen. But trust says something deeper. I can be with what is even when I don't know what comes next. I can stay open to life's unfolding. This capacity lives in your body, not just your mind. Trust is registered in the ventral vagal state of your nervous system, that parasympathetic mode where your heart rate varies gently, your breath flows easily, your muscles soften, and you feel both alert and at ease. This is the biological state from which true wisdom emerges. You cannot access your deepest intelligence from a state of panic or control. You can only access it from trust. Many of us lost our basic trust long ago, perhaps in childhood, when the world proved unsafe in ways large or small, perhaps in relationship betrayals, perhaps through the accumulation of disappointments. The nervous system learned the world is not safe. Therefore, I must control. I must plan. I must grip tighter. But here is what neuroscience now confirms: the controlling response, while understandable, actually creates more of the danger it seeks to prevent. When you remain in chronic vigilance, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain capable of creativity, nuance, and wise decision-making, goes offline. Your amygdala takes over, and you perceive threat everywhere. You make decisions from fear, which creates more situations to fear. The cycle perpetuates itself. This is why psychology for sleep is not just about sleeping better tonight. It's about changing the fundamental relationship with life that makes sleep impossible. Let us walk through history and see how the wisest humans have always known this truth. In ancient Rome, the Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." He taught that we do not control events, only our response to events. He practiced amor fati, love of fate, which meant embracing what happens rather than demanding life be different. This was not resignation. This was active love, conscious choice to trust that even difficulty serves the soul's education. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in the known world, yet his meditations reveal a man intimately familiar with uncertainty and loss. He lost 8 of his 13 children. He ruled during plague, war, and natural disasters. He could have demanded that life be different, could have raged against the unfairness of so much suffering. Instead, he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This is the Stoic teaching at its core. There is a natural order to things, a logos that governs existence. Our suffering comes not from this order, but from our resistance to it. When we align our will with what is, rather than what we wish, we discover a freedom that no external circumstance can touch. Marcus practiced this daily, reminding himself each morning, when you wake up, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. Not pessimism, preparation, not cynicism, realism. He was training himself to not be surprised by difficulty, to not demand that people be different than they are to meet life as it actually shows up, rather than as he wishes it would. The Stoics developed specific practices for cultivating trust. They practiced premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, imagining loss, failure, death, not to become anxious but to reduce the shock when such things inevitably arrived. They practiced negative visualization, imagining losing what they cherished, not to torture themselves, but to appreciate what they had. While they had it, they distinguished rigorously between what's up to us, our thoughts, judgments, responses, and what's not up to us, everything else pouring energy only into the former. This is psychology for sleep in its ancient form, learning to release the grip on what you cannot control, finding peace not through getting what you want, but through wanting what you get, discovering that freedom lives not in circumstances, but in consciousness itself. In ancient China, Lao Tzu composed the Tao Te Ching, perhaps the greatest manual on trust ever written. The master does nothing, he wrote, yet leaves nothing undone. This is Wu Wei, not laziness, but action that flows from alignment with the way things are, rather than the way we demand them to be. Like water finding its path around obstacles, like plants growing toward light life, has its own intelligence. Our task is not to override this intelligence, but to cooperate with it. The Tao Te Ching returns again and again to images from nature. The valley that receives all streams, the uncarved block that contains all possibilities, the empty bowl that serves by being hollow, the tree that bends in the wind rather than breaking. These are not mere poetic metaphors. They are observations of how reality actually functions when not interfered with by human grasping. Consider the teaching, when I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. This is radical acceptance not as defeat, but as liberation. The ego wants to maintain its carefully constructed identity, its story about who you are and who you should be. But this very maintenance requires constant effort, constant defense, constant performance. When you release the need to be a particular way, energy previously spent on maintenance becomes available for actual living. Or this teaching. Do you have the patience to wait until your mud settles and the water is clear? Think about what happens when you shake a glass of muddy water. The more you shake it, the more you try to force clarity, the muddier it becomes. But if you simply set it down and wait, gravity does the work. The sediment settles. The water clears. Your intervention is not required. Your controlling actually prevents the natural clarification that would occur through non-interference. This is Wu Wei, action through non-action, doing through not doing, controlling through not controlling. It sounds paradoxical to the Western mind trained in effort and force. But watch a master of any craft, a chef, a carpenter, a musician, an athlete at peak performance, and you'll see Wu Wei in action. The movements flow. There is no excess tension, The work happens with an ease that looks effortless because the person has learned to cooperate with the material, the instrument, the body's wisdom, rather than fighting against it. In medieval Europe, Christian mystics pushed beyond doctrine into direct experience of divine trust. Meister Eckhart, the German theologian, taught Gelassenheit, letting be releasing, allowing. God is at home, he wrote. It is we who have gone out for a walk. Trust in this view is the return home, the recognition that we were never separate from the source that holds us. Eckhart was teaching in the 14th century, speaking to people whose lives were genuinely precarious: famine, plague, war, infant mortality. Yet he taught that beneath all this suffering lay a profound truth. You are not separate from God, from the ground of being, from the intelligence that creates and sustains all things. The feeling of separation is illusion. The anxiety about being alone is based on false perception. You cannot fall out of God any more than a wave can fall out of the ocean. This sounds mystical, perhaps too abstract. But Eckhart made it practical. The most important hour is always the present. The most significant person is precisely the one sitting across from you right now. The most necessary work is always love. This is trust embodied, being fully present to what is, rather than living in imagination about what might be or should be. By the Romantic era, as rationalism began to dominate Western thought, poets sensed what was being lost. John Keats wrote to his brothers about negative capability. When a man is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. He saw that the greatest artists, the deepest thinkers, were those who could dwell in not knowing without panic. This too is trust, the capacity to let mystery be mysterious. Keats was himself facing mortality. He would die of tuberculosis at age 25. Yet, his letters reveal a man grappling with how to live fully in uncertainty. He observed that his friend Coleridge was brilliant, but diminished his work by always needing to categorize, systematize, explain. Keats saw that Shakespeare's genius lay partly in his ability to inhabit contradiction, without needing to resolve it, to let Hamlet be both decisive and indecisive, to let King Lear be both victim and perpetrator, to let the plays contain ambiguity rather than moral clarity. This capacity to hold paradox, to tolerate ambiguity, to remain present with questions that have no clear answers, this is what Keats meant by negative capability. And it's increasingly rare in our culture of instant information and binary thinking. We want answers, solutions, clarity, certainty. But life offers mystery, complexity, paradox, uncertainty. The question is whether we can meet life as it actually is, rather than demanding it be simpler than it is. And then came Carl Jung, who synthesized all these streams into a psychological framework. Jung taught that the ego, our conscious sense of I, is only a small part of the total psyche. Beneath and beyond the ego lies the self, an organizing center of wisdom and wholeness. The ego wants control. The self wants integration, individuation. The process of becoming fully human requires learning to trust the self's guidance, even when the ego cannot understand it. Jung discovered synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that occur when we stop forcing outcomes and allow life to reveal its pattern. He found that his patients who learned to trust their dreams, their intuitions, their seemingly irrational impulses often discovered that life was speaking to them, guiding them through symbols and signs. But this guidance could only be received when they released the demand for rational control. All of these traditions point toward the same psychological truth. Trust is the foundation of well-being. Without it, we are forever at war with life. With it, we become participants in a deeper intelligence. So what happens in a human life when trust is cultivated? What are the gifts of this practice? First, anxiety transforms. The research is clear: individuals with higher baseline trust experience less chronic anxiety. This is not because their lives are easier, but because they've learned to distinguish between present danger and imagined threat. The trusted nervous system remains calm until actual danger appears, then responds appropriately, and returns to baseline. The distrusting nervous system lives in constant activation, perceiving threat everywhere, exhausting itself with false alarms. Think of it this way: your ancient ancestors who lived on the savannah needed acute threat detection. A rustle in the grass might be wind, or it might be a predator. The ones who assumed threat and reacted quickly survived more often than those who remained calm. So we inherited nervous systems biased toward detecting danger. This served us well for millennia. But in modern life, that same system misfires constantly. A critical email triggers the same physiological response as a lion attack. A social slight activates the same alarm as physical danger. Your nervous system cannot tell the difference between a genuine threat to your survival and a perceived threat to your ego. So it treats everything as emergency, which means nothing gets the appropriate response. Trust retrains this system not to ignore danger, but to assess it accurately. When you cultivate trust, you're teaching your nervous system, we have time to evaluate. We can feel into what's actually present rather than reacting to what we imagine might happen. We can distinguish between uncomfortable and unsafe. This discernment is the foundation of wisdom. Researchers studying emotional regulation have found that people with higher trust capacity show greater activity in the prefrontal cortex during stressful situations, meaning they maintain access to executive function, to nuanced thinking, to wise response, rather than reactive defense. The distrusting person under stress shows decreased prefrontal activity and increased amygdala activation, meaning they literally cannot think clearly, cannot access perspective, cannot respond with wisdom, because the threat detection system has hijacked the whole system. This has profound implications. Every important decision you make under chronic anxiety is being made by a brain in emergency mode, with diminished capacity for nuanced complexity or long-term thinking. You're essentially letting your amygdala brilliant at detecting predators, terrible at navigating the complexity of modern life. Make choices that will shape your future. This is why anxious people often make choices that create more anxiety, perpetuating the cycle. Second, creativity flourishes. Every artist knows this secret. The greatest work comes not from forcing, but from allowing. The painter must trust the hand's wisdom. The writer must trust the words that arrive unbidden. The musician must trust the silence between notes. When we release our grip on how things should be, space opens for something truer to emerge. This is psychology for sleep in action. In the surrender of striving, the real work happens. Consider the creative process itself. You cannot force inspiration. You can create conditions where inspiration is more likely to arrive: regular practice, dedicated time removal of distractions. But the actual moment of creative breakthrough always comes as a gift, not as a product of will. Writers speak of characters who take over the story doing things the writer didn't plan. Painters describe the moment when the painter tells them what it needs to become. Musicians talk about the flow state where their hands move faster than their thinking mind can track. This is not mystical. It's the integration of conscious intention with unconscious wisdom. Your unconscious mind processes vastly more information than your conscious mind can hold. It makes connections your rational mind would dismiss. It holds patterns your logical mind cannot articulate. But it can only contribute to your creative work when you create space for it, which means releasing the controlling mind's demand for predetermined outcomes. The research on creativity consistently shows that breakthrough insights rarely come during active problem solving. They come during rest, during sleep, during walks in nature, during showers, moments when the conscious mind relaxes its grip, and the unconscious can surface with solutions the conscious mind could not find. This is why companies like Google build rest spaces and encourage unstructured time, not out of kindness, but because they understand that innovation requires the trust to not work, to not strive to allow the unknown to emerge. Third, decision-making improves dramatically. Researchers studying intuitive decision-making have found that our best choices often come from a felt sense in the body, rather than exhaustive rational analysis. This is not anti-rational, it's trans-rational. It's the integration of conscious thought with unconscious wisdom. But we can only access this integration from a trusted state. When we're gripping, controlling, demanding certainty, we cut ourselves off from the deeper, knowing that already understands what's right. There's a famous study where participants were asked to choose between 4 decks of cards. 2 decks were rigged to produce long-term losses. 2 were rigged for long-term gains. Participants' conscious minds needed about 50 card draws to figure out the pattern. But their palms began sweating an unconscious stress response after only 10 draws from the bad decks. Their bodies knew before their minds knew. The participants who trusted their felt sense and avoided the decks that made them uncomfortable outperformed those who tried to figure it out rationally. This is the wisdom of intuition, not magical thinking, not ignoring evidence, but including somatic intelligence in the decision-making process. Your body is constantly reading subtle cues in your environment, processing information below conscious awareness, and generating felt responses. When you trust these responses enough to include them in your consideration, alongside rational analysis, not instead of it, your decisions improve. But you cannot access intuition from a state of chronic tension. When your body is in constant defense, every feeling becomes an alarm signal. You cannot distinguish between the intuitive, "No, this isn't right," and the anxious, "Everything is dangerous." Trust calms the system enough that subtle signals can be heard. Fourth, relationships deepen. Trust is the foundation of intimacy. When we learn to trust ourselves, we become capable of trusting others, not blindly, not naively, but wisely. We can be vulnerable without collapsing. We can receive love without immediately suspecting manipulation. We can give without needing to control the outcome. The quality of our relationships reflects the quality of our relationship with life itself. Consider what happens in relationships when trust is absent. You monitor the other person, constantly looking for signs of betrayal or abandonment. You cannot be present with them because you're always scanning for threat. You perform the version of yourself you think they want, rather than revealing who you actually are. You need reassurance constantly because you cannot hold the uncertainty of another person's autonomous existence. You try to control their behavior, their choices, their feelings, not out of malice, but out of the terror that comes from fundamental distrust. This creates exactly the disconnection you fear. The other person feels your lack of trust, which makes them defensive or withdrawn, which confirms your belief that people can't be trusted, which increases your controlling behavior, which pushes them further away. The cycle is self-fulfilling, self-reinforcing, and completely exhausting for everyone involved. But when you develop trust first in yourself, in your ability to survive disappointment and betrayal, in your resilience and resourcefulness, you become capable of a different kind of relationship. You can allow the other person to be fully themselves without needing to manage or control them. You can be disappointed without being destroyed. You can be hurt without closing off completely. You can love without grasping, connect without consuming, commit without losing yourself. Research on secure attachment in adult relationships shows that partners who both demonstrate high trust capacity report greater satisfaction, better conflict resolution, more authentic communication, and stronger resilience through difficulties. Not because they never face challenges, but because they can face challenges without the added burden of fundamental distrust making everything worse. Fifth, synchronicities multiply. This is perhaps the most remarkable gift. When we stop forcing our agenda onto life, life begins to respond. Meaningful coincidences appear. The right book falls off the shelf. The perfect opportunity arrives just when needed. The person you need to meet appears. This is not magic. It's what Jung called the alignment of inner and outer. The recognition that psyche and world are not separate, but interpenetrating. Jung spent years documenting synchronistic phenomena. Events connected not by causation, but by meaning. A patient dreams of a golden scarab beetle, and at the exact moment she's telling Jung about the dream, a real scarab beetle appears at the window, trying to get in. Jung catches it and hands it to her, and the synchronicity breaks through her excessive rationalism, allowing her therapy to deepen. Skeptics dismiss such stories as confirmation bias or selective attention. And certainly those factors play a role. When you're looking for synchronicity, you notice it more. But Jung's point was deeper. What if the universe is not just dead matter, following mechanical laws, but a living, meaningful reality that responds to consciousness? What if the boundary between inner and outer, subjective and objective, is more porous than our materialist worldview assumes? You don't have to accept Jung's metaphysics to work with synchronicity practically. Simply notice when you stop forcing your agenda, when you create space for the unexpected, when you trust that life might have intelligence beyond your planning. Do opportunities appear that wouldn't have appeared otherwise? Do connections form that your controlling mind would have prevented? Does guidance arrive through unexpected channels? Most people who develop trust report exactly this, that life becomes more fluid, more responsive, more supportive. Not because they've become passive, but because they've learned to dance with life rather than wrestle it into submission. They make plans but hold them lightly. They have intentions but remain open to better paths. They work toward goals but notice when the goal itself needs to change. All of these benefits are available not through more control, but through less. Not through more striving, but through more allowing. This is the great reversal that Psychology for Sleep invites you into discovering that what you thought was keeping you safe is actually keeping you suffering, and what you thought was dangerous, releasing control, is actually the path to the life you've been longing for. But how do we actually cultivate trust when our nervous systems are wired for vigilance? We begin with the body. Trust is not a mental concept, it's a somatic state. Small practices can begin to shift the pattern. Working with the breath, extending the exhale, slowing the pace sends signals to the nervous system that it's safe to relax. Spending time in nature where life's intelligent unfolding is visible everywhere helps recalibrate our expectations of how things work. Practicing small surrenders, deliberately not correcting someone, not planning the next moment, not knowing, builds the capacity to stay present with uncertainty. These practices sound simple, but they directly challenge the ego survival strategy. The controlling part of you will resist. It will say, if I don't plan, everything will fall apart. If I don't control, I'll be hurt. If I trust, I'm naive. This voice is trying to protect you based on old wounds. It deserves compassion, not condemnation. But it doesn't deserve to run your life. Jung taught that we must distinguish between healthy and unhealthy surrender. Healthy surrender is active. It's saying yes to what is while remaining responsive to what's needed. Unhealthy surrender is passive. It's collapsing into victimhood or denying our agency. True trust includes healthy boundaries, clear discernment, and personal responsibility. It's not about becoming a doormat. It's about becoming wise. For deeper exploration, several texts illuminate this territory. Jung's essay, Synchronicity and a Causal Connecting Principle, reveals how meaningful coincidence operates. Stephen Mitchell's translation of the Tao Te Ching offers profound simplicity about trust. Pema Chodron's When Things Fall Apart teaches trust through Buddhist lens. These resources can support your journey, though they're not required. Your direct experience is the greatest teacher. We must also address the shadow side of trust teachings. In spiritual communities, you'll often hear, just let go, or surrender, used to bypass legitimate pain or excuse genuine harm. This is spiritual bypassing using elevated language to avoid necessary action. Real trust doesn't mean accepting abuse or staying in harmful situations. It means trusting yourself enough to set boundaries, to leave what's not working, to protect what's sacred. Trust includes the wisdom of discernment. There's also the reality that letting go language can carry privilege. Someone facing systemic oppression or violence cannot simply trust in the same way someone with safety and resources can. This doesn't invalidate the teaching, it contextualizes it. Trust must be taught with awareness of power, safety, and social reality. And yet, even accounting for all these nuances, the essential teaching remains we suffer most, not from what happens to us, but from our relationship to what happens. This is the ground of all-wise psychology for sleep, for life, for transformation. As you rest now, breathing, slowly feeling your body soften into the surface beneath you, notice how it feels to simply allow. Allow the breath to breathe itself. Allow thoughts to come and go without grasping them. Allow uncertainty about tomorrow without rushing to solve it. This is trust in its simplest form, letting the next moment arrive without forcing it into being. The Stoics had a practice distinguish between what you control and what you don't. You control your thoughts, your responses, your character. You don't control outcomes, other people, or external events. Pour your energy into what you can affect. Release your grip on everything else. This single shift can transform a life. The Taoists added nuance even within what you control, work with, rather than against the grain of reality. When you're trying to force something that's not ready, you create suffering. When you recognize the right moment and move with it, everything flows. This is not passivity, it's exquisite responsiveness. Jung synthesized both trust, yourself, that deeper organizing center that knows more than your ego knows. Your dreams are speaking, your body is speaking, your intuitions are speaking. But you can only hear these voices when you stop shouting your demands at life. Trust is not naive. Trust is not reckless. Trust is the cultivation of a nervous system that can remain open even in uncertainty. Trust is the practice of staying present with what is, even when it's not what you wanted. Trust is the recognition that you are held by something much larger than your understanding, and that this holding is reliable even when invisible. And here at the edge of this first exploration, we sense something deeper calling. For this pattern of trust and surrender is not just a psychological technique, it's woven into the very structure of human meaning making. It appears in every mythology, every sacred story, every archetypal pattern, which brings us to the threshold of something older than psychology, something that lives in the collective unconscious of our species. Let us cross into that territory now. The patterns we've been exploring are not new. They are not modern discoveries of psychology for sleep or anxiety treatment. They are ancient archetypal meaning. They belong to the deepest structures of human consciousness itself. Jung called these patterns archetypes, universal images and motifs that appear across all cultures and all times because they reflect the fundamental patterns of how psyche itself is structured. When we speak of trust and surrender, we are touching something that lives in myth, in fairy tale, in sacred story. And when we understand these archetypal patterns, something in us recognizes itself. We remember that we are not the first to face this challenge, and we will not be the last. The struggle between control and surrender is written into the human journey itself. At the center of Jung's psychology stands the archetype of the self, not the small self of ego, but the capital S self, the organizing center of the total personality. The self is that in you which knows more than you consciously know. It speaks through dreams, through symbols, through the meaningful coincidences Jung called synchronicity. The self is trustworthy in ways the ego can never be, because it encompasses far more than the narrow band of consciousness we identify as me. The relationship between ego and self is like the relationship between a small boat and the ocean. The ego wants to believe it's controlling the journey, steering toward chosen destinations. But the deeper truth is that the ocean currents carry you, the weather moves you, The moon pulls the tides that lift and lower you. Your task is not to deny the ocean's power, but to learn to sail it to work with these greater forces, rather than pretending they don't exist. Accompanying the self-archetype are other guides. The wise old man or wise woman appears in our dreams and our stories as the one who knows, who has walked this path before. Think of Gandalf of Yoda, of the fairy godmother of Merlin. This archetype represents the wisdom that comes not from striving, but from experience, from surrender to life's teachings. When we learn to trust, we begin to hear the voice of the wise one within ourselves. And there is the divine child, the archetype of original trust before the world wounded us. Children naturally trust until they learn not to. They reach toward life with open hands. They believe in magic because they haven't yet been taught that magic is impossible. The spiritual journey is not about going somewhere new. It's about returning to that original openness, but now consciously, with the wisdom of having lived. These archetypal figures are not outside you. They are structures of your own psyche, waiting to be recognized and integrated. When you learn to trust, you are establishing conscious relationship with these deeper aspects of yourself. Now let us look at how this pattern appears in the great stories that shape human consciousness. Every mythology contains stories of necessary descent, of forced surrender, of death that leads to rebirth. These are not random tales, they are maps of psychological transformation. Consider the Sumerian goddess Inanna, one of the oldest stories we have. Inanna decides to descend into the underworld to visit her sister Ereshkigal. At each of the 7 gates, she must remove one piece of her royal adornments, her crown, her robes, her jewels, until she stands naked and powerless before the throne of death. There she is killed, her corpse hung on a hook for 3 days, until other gods rescue and resurrect her. This is not a story about a goddess. This is a story about you, about the descent every human must make into their own underworld, the parts of themselves they've denied or rejected. About the stripping away that happens when life removes our defenses one by one, our status, our certainties, our carefully constructed identity. About the death of who we thought we were and the resurrection into who we actually are. This is trust, a surrender not to defeat, but to transformation. Look at what Inanna must release at each gate. First, her crown, her authority, her position, her power in the world. Second, her lapis lazuli, beads her wealth, her material security. Third, her breastplate, her protection, her armor against vulnerability. Fourth, her golden bracelets, her adornment, her beauty, what makes her desirable. Fifth, her measuring rod, and line, her ability to measure, judge, and control. Sixth, her lapis lazuli necklace, more layers of defense. Seventh, her royal robe, her very identity, the garment that says who she is. Each gate demands the surrender of something you thought you needed to survive. This is the psychology of deep transformation. You cannot take your defenses into the underworld. You cannot take your status, your certainty, your control. You must stand naked before the truth of yourself, which the ego experiences as death. But this death is not the end. It's the necessary dissolution before reconstitution at a higher level of integration. The story becomes even more profound when we understand that Inanna chooses this descent. She is not forced. She decides to visit her sister in the underworld, knowing it's dangerous, knowing there will be cost. This is the crucial distinction between healthy and unhealthy surrender. Healthy surrender is chosen even when it's terrifying. You're not being passive or victimized. You're consciously choosing to face what you've avoided, to release what no longer serves, to die to who you were, so you can become who you're meant to be. When Inanna finally returns from the underworld, she is fundamentally changed. She has seen death. She has been death. She carries that knowledge back to the upper world, and it makes her wiser, deeper, more whole. But she also brings consequences. She must send someone else to the underworld in her place. The myth teaches that transformation always has cost, always requires sacrifice, always demands we give up something we value for something we value more. Or consider the biblical story of Jonah. God calls him to preach in Nineveh, but Jonah runs away, boards a ship going the opposite direction. A storm arises, and Jonah knows it's because of him. He tells the sailors to throw him overboard. He is swallowed by a great fish and sits in its belly for 3 days before being vomited onto shore, where he then does what he was called to do all along. This is the pattern of resistance and forced surrender. How often do we run from what we're called toward? How often does life pursue us until we can no longer escape? How often must we be swallowed, consumed by depression, crisis, illness, loss, before we finally surrender to the path that was ours all along? The belly of the whale is not punishment. It's the place of transformation, the dark container where the old self dissolves and the new self gestates. Think about your own life. What have you been running from? What calling have you avoided because it seems too risky, too uncertain, too far from what you planned? And what storms have arisen when you ran? Relationship, crises, health issues, career collapses, losses that stopped you in your tracks. These are not random punishments. They're the universe's way of saying, you're going the wrong direction. The path you're running toward leads away from your life. The belly of the whale represents the time of enforced stillness, when all your usual strategies stop working and you have nothing to do but face yourself. For Jonah, it was literal, trapped in darkness, unable to run, forced to finally listen to the call he'd been avoiding. For us, it might be illness that forces rest loss, that forces grieving failure, that forces reassessment crisis, that forces surrender of the life we thought we wanted. And here's what the myth teaches: you will eventually do what you're called to do. You can do it willingly, with grace accepting the invitation when it first arrives. Or you can be dragged through crisis after crisis until you finally surrender. Either way, the path finds you. The only question is how much suffering you'll create through resistance. The tarot offers another map of this journey. The Fool card shows the archetypal innocent someone stepping off a cliff, gazing up at the sky, a small dog at his heels, a bindle over his shoulder. To the rational mind, this is madness. He's about to fall to his death. But to the archetypal mind, this is wisdom, the trust that takes the step even without seeing where it lands. But notice the details. The Fool is not reckless. He carries a small pack with provisions. The dog represents instinctual wisdom, staying close alert to genuine danger. The sun shines behind him, suggesting he's moving from light, carrying light into the unknown. And the cliff edge represents the threshold between the known and the unknown. The moment when you must choose, stay in the familiar that's grown too small, or step into the uncertainty that holds your becoming. Every significant life transition requires us to play the fool, to step into uncertainty, to release the grip on what we know, to trust that the ground will meet us, even though we cannot see it yet. Graduation, marriage, divorce, career changes, relocations, parenthood, creative projects. All of these demand the fool's trust. You cannot know in advance whether it will work out. You can only know that staying where you are no longer serves your growth. The beauty of the Fool is that he appears at the beginning of the tarot journey, card 0, but he also travels through the entire sequence, experiencing every archetype, learning every lesson, until he reaches completion. He is both the starting point and the companion throughout the journey. This suggests that the capacity for innocent trust for beginner's mind, for willingness to not know, this is not something we outgrow, but something we must maintain and return to repeatedly as we spiral deeper into life's mysteries. In the Tarot's major arcana, the Death card appears midway through the journey. People fear this card thinking it means literal death, but its teaching is psychological, the death of who you were necessary for the birth of who you're becoming. The Death card shows a skeleton in armor riding a white horse carrying a black flag with a white rose. Everything must die king. Commoner, child, priest, no one escapes. But the rose survives and the sun rises in the background. Trust this death. It is not the end, it is transformation. What must die in you for your authentic self to emerge? What identity? What role? What version of yourself have you been clinging to, past its expiration date? The dying causes grief, and grief must be honored, but the death itself is not tragedy, it's necessity. The caterpillar must dissolve completely before the butterfly can form. You cannot become who you're meant to be while still clinging to who you were. This pattern appears in our greatest literature as well, showing us that artists channel these archetypal truths even when they don't consciously understand them. In Dante's Inferno, the famous inscription over the gates of hell reads, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." This sounds like despair, but it's actually the gateway to transformation. Dante must abandon his ego's hope, his attachment to how things should be, in order to descend through the layers of his own shadow and eventually ascend to paradise. The journey requires surrendering the surface hope that avoids darkness and trusting the deeper process that includes darkness on the path to light. The structure of Dante's journey is itself instructive. He must descend through 9 circles of hell, each representing a different form of sin, which Jung would call shadow, content, the disowned aspects of psyche. Dante cannot skip this descent. He cannot fly directly to paradise. He must walk through every level, witnessing and acknowledging the capacity for these behaviors in himself. This is the work of integration, not denying what we're capable of, but recognizing it, understanding it, choosing differently. And Dante doesn't make this journey alone. He's guided by Virgil, the poet he most admired, representing the wisdom of those who've walked the path before the teaching that can only be received when we're humble enough to admit we need guidance. Later, he's guided by Beatrice, his beloved representing the soul's feminine wisdom, the anima that connects us to deeper truth. The journey of transformation requires both acknowledgement of what we need to learn and willingness to be guided by what knows more than our ego knows. Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground gives us the voice of the controlling mind taken to its extreme. a narrator so trapped in rationalism, so obsessed with being right, so unable to trust human connection that he becomes a monster of consciousness, suffering endlessly from his own hyper-awareness and inability to simply be. This is the fate of the ego, cut off from trust, brilliant, articulate, and utterly miserable. The underground man is one of literature's most uncomfortable characters because he's so recognizably human in his contradictions. He despises himself, but cannot stop analyzing himself. He craves connection, but sabotages every relationship. He sees through social pretense, but cannot function without it. He knows rationally what he should do, but cannot make himself do it. Sound familiar? Dostoevsky is showing us what happens when consciousness becomes divorced from instinct, when intellect dominates feeling, when the head tyrannizes the heart. The underground man cannot trust his spontaneous impulses because he immediately analyzes them to death. He cannot be authentic because he's always watching himself perform. He cannot love because he cannot surrender the control that love requires. He is consciousness eating itself, thinking, eating being analysis, destroying experience. And the tragedy is that he knows it. He sees his own patterns with painful clarity. But knowing doesn't free him because he cannot stop knowing long enough to simply be. This is the prison of excessive self-consciousness, and it's increasingly common in our therapeutic, analyzed, self-aware culture. We know so much about ourselves that we've forgotten how to be ourselves. And Rilke, the great poet of transformation, writes in his Do We Know Elegies, every angel is terrifying. The messages that come from deeper reality, from the self, from what is larger than us, they are terrifying to the ego because they demand surrender of everything we've built. And yet Rilke also writes, perhaps we are here in order to say house bridge, fountain, gate pitcher, fruit tree window. We are here to say yes to what is to bless reality itself, to trust life enough to fully inhabit it. Rilke wrote the Dino Elegies over 10 years in fragments during a time of profound personal and cultural crisis, World War I, the collapse of the old European order, his own inner turmoil. The poems are difficult, ecstatic, demanding. They ask everything of the reader because they asked everything of the poet. The opening line, who if I cried out would hear me among the angels' hierarchies, establishes the existential aloneness that's the starting point of modern consciousness. We cannot return to the naive faith of earlier eras. We know too much, have lost too much, see too clearly. But Rilke suggests that from this very aloneness, from this exile, something new can emerge, not the old religious certainty, but a trust earned through directly facing what is including the terror. Every angel is terrifying because the divine, the numinous, the self, whatever we call what's larger than ego, demands that we change, grow, die to who we were. It will not leave us comfortable. It will not confirm our preferences. It arrives with annunciations that upend our plans. And yet Rilke says, this terror is also beauty. This demand is also invitation. This death is also birth. The elegies end with a vision of transformation that includes everything, beauty and terror life, and death, the visible and invisible worlds all held together, all sacred, all necessary. This is trust at the highest level. Not trust that we'll get what we want, but trust that what is somehow right, is somehow serving, becoming even when we cannot see how. These literary witnesses show us the same truth. the myths reveal. The transformation we seek requires the surrender we fear. The art that endures across centuries is art that channels archetypal truth, that speaks to something in us that recognizes itself across culture and time. When you read these works and feel that shock of recognition, yes, that's exactly it. You're touching the collective unconscious, the layer of psyche we all share, the patterns that structure human experience regardless of when or where we live. This is why psychology for sleep includes engagement with myth, literature, art. These are not mere entertainment. They are medicine instruction maps for the journey of becoming human. The stories have survived because they contain necessary truth. Your task is not to admire them from distance, but to recognize yourself in them, to see your own journey in Inanna's descent, your own resistance in Jonah's flight, your own terror in facing the angel, your own possibility in saying yes to what is. Let us look deeper into the symbolic systems that encode these truths. In the Tarot's major arcana, the Death card appears midway through the journey. People fear this card thinking it means literal death. But its teaching is psychological, the death of who you were, necessary for the birth of who you're becoming. The Death card shows a skeleton in armor, riding a white horse, carrying a black flag with a white rose. Everything must die. King commoner, child priest, no one escapes. But the rose survives, and the sun rises in the background. Trust this death. It is not the end, it is transformation. In alchemical symbolism, the same pattern appears as Negredo, the blackening, the putrefaction, the stage where everything dissolves into chaos. Medieval alchemists were not just trying to make gold, they were encoding psychological transformation in chemical metaphor. The Negredo is necessary. You must endure the dissolution before the crystallization can occur. Trust the darkness. Something is working in it. The chrysalis provides nature's own symbol of this truth. The caterpillar doesn't gradually transform into a butterfly. It completely dissolves into undifferentiated goo before reforming. Inside the chrysalis is total chaos, total surrender of form. Only from that formless state can the new creature emerge. If you cut open a chrysalis to help the butterfly, you kill it. The process requires the dark container, the time of not knowing, the trust that something is happening, even when nothing seems to be happening. These symbols speak to something in us that recognizes truth beyond words. This is psychology for sleep, working at the archetypal level, not just calming your conscious mind, but speaking to the deeper structures that hold meaning. But every archetype has a shadow, a distorted or unconscious manifestation. The shadow of trust is passive victimhood, the person who abdicates all agency and blames fate for their suffering. The shadow of surrender is spiritual bypassing, using elevated language to avoid necessary action or confrontation. The shadow of flow is aimless drifting, mistaking lack of direction for going with the current. These shadows appear in our culture constantly. The wellness industry often promotes a sanitized version of surrender. Just manifest what you want. Just trust the universe. While ignoring structural inequality, genuine trauma, and the hard work transformation requires. This is the archetype divorced from reality, which is always dangerous. Authentic trust includes discernment. Healthy surrender includes boundaries. Real flow includes direction. The Tarot's fool steps off the cliff. Yes, but he carries a small pack with provisions, and a dog walks beside him, representing instinctual wisdom. Trust is not recklessness. It's conscious choice to engage with uncertainty rather than defend against it. Let us also see how these patterns manifest in our current culture. In films, we still tell these same stories. The Matrix is a modern retelling of Plato's cave, and the Buddhist awakening, Neo must choose between comfortable illusion and difficult reality, must die as his old self to be reborn into truth. Spirited Away shows a young girl who must work in a bathhouse for spirits, stripped of her name and identity before she can save her parents and reclaim herself. These are the old stories in new clothing. Even in social media behavior, we see the archetypal patterns. The performative self is the ego's construction, carefully controlled and curated. But the moments that truly move people online are moments of vulnerability, of surrender, of the facade of authentic humanity breaking through. We are collectively exhausted by the performance and hungry for reality. This hunger is the collective psyche longing for trust. In recovery movements like 12-step programs, the foundation is surrender. We admitted we were powerless, that our lives had become unmanageable. This is archetypal wisdom. You cannot heal while still maintaining the illusion of control. You must first acknowledge the truth of your powerlessness over the addiction, the outcome, the other person. Only from that acknowledgement can real transformation begin. And in the phenomenon of synchronicity, which more people are experiencing as linear rationalism loses its grip on our collective imagination, we see ancient archetypal wisdom returning. People are recognizing again that reality is not just mechanical cause and effect, but meaningful pattern, responsive intelligence, a living web of connections. This recognition requires trust, because synchronicity cannot be forced. It can only be noticed, honored, followed. The archetype of the journey itself, leaving home facing trials, receiving aid from magical helpers, entering the underworld, emerging, transformed, returning home with gifts. This is the pattern Jung called individuation. And it is also the pattern we're living right now, you and I in this moment. You've left the busy day behind. You're entering the liminal space of sleep where consciousness dissolves. You're trusting that tomorrow you'll return, transformed by rest. This nightly journey is its own sacred descent and return. And when we understand these patterns archetypally, something loosens in us. We realize I am not alone in this struggle. Every human who has ever lived has faced the choice between control and trust, between ego and self, between the known and the mystery. The fairy tales were trying to tell us. The myths were trying to prepare us. The great literature was trying to show us the way. This is psychology for sleep at its deepest, not techniques, but recognition. Recognition that your anxiety is an old story. Recognition that the path through it is also old, also mapped, also traveled by countless others. Recognition that you are part of a much larger pattern of consciousness itself, learning to trust its own depths. And as you rest now, breathing softly, feeling the weight of your body held by the earth beneath you, you might sense these archetypes not as abstract concepts, but as living presences. The wise one within you already knows what your ego has forgotten. The divine child within you still remembers how to trust. The self within you is already guiding. This unfolding has been guiding it all along, waiting patiently for your conscious recognition. The myths are not out there, they are in here. The journey is not someday, it is now. The surrender being asked of you is not theoretical. It is the literal release of the grip you're holding in your jaw, your shoulders, your belly right now. Trust as archetypal pattern becomes trust as lived experience in this moment, this breath, this letting go. But what is actually happening in your body, in your brain, when you make this shift? What does neuroscience tell us about the physiology of surrender? Let us now turn from the archetypal to the biological and discover that here too, ancient wisdom is confirmed by modern science. We have explored trust psychologically and archetypally. Now we turn to biology, to the actual mechanisms of your nervous system, your brain, your biochemistry, for the teaching remains incomplete until we understand what actually happens in your body when you release control, what changes in your brain when you learn to trust. This is psychology for sleep, grounded in science, not as opposition to wisdom, traditions, but as confirmation of what the mystics have always known through direct experience. Modern neuroscience distinguishes trust from related states, like hope optimism or wishful thinking, by measuring actual brain activity, hormone levels, and nervous system responses. Trust is not merely a belief, it's a neurobiological state that can be observed, measured, and cultivated through practice. Researchers have identified specific neural correlates of trust. When people report feeling trust, whether in another person in the situation or in life itself, their brain scans show predictable patterns. Activity increases in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, an area associated with processing value and meaning. Activity decreases in the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center. The anterior cingulate cortex involved in conflict monitoring and error detection shows less activation, suggesting the brain is expending less energy scanning for problems. This is significant. The trusted brain literally perceives a different reality than the distrusting brain. It's not that one is seeing truth and the other illusion. It's that trust and distrust create feedback loops that reinforce their own perceptions. If you expect threat, you'll notice threat, which confirms your expectation, which increases your vigilance. If you expect benevolence, you'll notice support and possibility, which confirms trust, which allows greater openness. This is why transformation is so difficult. You cannot think your way into trust while your nervous system remains in defense. You must work at the biological level, creating new patterns in your actual physiology. But before we can understand how trust develops, we must understand how it's damaged. This requires looking at how trust capacity develops across the human lifespan. Erik Erikson, the developmental psychologist, identified trust versus mistrust as the first and most foundational stage of human psychological development, occurring from birth to roughly 18 months. During this period, an infant learns whether the world is reliable. When caregivers respond consistently and lovingly to needs, the infant develops basic trust, a fundamental sense that life is good, that needs will be met, that existence is safe. When caregivers are neglectful, inconsistent, or harmful, the infant develops basic mistrust, a foundational sense that the world is dangerous, and needs must be met through one's own vigilance and control. This early programming runs deeper than conscious memory. It becomes part of your autonomic nervous system's baseline setting, and it influences everything that follows your relationships, your career choices, your ability to take risks, your capacity for joy, your sleep quality, everything. Attachment researchers like John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth expanded this understanding. They identified different attachment styles based on early relational experiences. Secure attachment developed through consistent, attuned caregiving creates individuals who can trust appropriately, form healthy relationships, regulate their emotions, and navigate uncertainty without collapsing into anxiety or denial. But insecure attachment patterns, anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, create individuals whose nervous systems remain in chronic defense. Anxious attachment manifests as hypervigilance about relationships, constantly scanning for abandonment, unable to trust reassurance. Avoidant attachment manifests as emotional disconnection, trusting no one, maintaining rigid control. Disorganized attachment manifests as profound confusion about trust itself. Caregivers were both source of comfort and source of threat, creating impossible double binds. If you're listening now with recognition, knowing your trust was damaged early, first understand that this is not your fault. You adapted brilliantly to survive circumstances you didn't choose. Your controlling tendencies, your hypervigilance, your difficulty. Surrendering these were intelligent responses to real danger. Honor them, even as you begin to question whether they still serve you. The beautiful truth neuroscience reveals is neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to rewire throughout life. Early patterns are powerful, but not permanent. The adult brain can develop new neural pathways, new response patterns, new default settings. This is the biological basis for healing, for growth, for earned secure attachment, even when you didn't receive it as a child. But change requires working with your nervous system, not just your thinking mind. And this is where understanding autonomic nervous system states becomes crucial. Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory revolutionized our understanding of nervous system function. He identified not two states, fight or flight versus rest and digest, but three distinct states regulated by different branches of the vagus nerve. The oldest system, the dorsal vagal complex, is responsible for shutdown collapse, freeze immobilization. This is the system that takes over when threat is overwhelming, and neither fight nor flight is possible. It's play and dead dissociating depression, giving up. The middle system, the sympathetic nervous system, is responsible for mobilization, fight or flight active response to threat, preparing the body for action. Heart rate increases, breathing quickens, blood moves to muscles, digestion stops. This is the system most of us know as stress response. But there's a third system unique to mammals, the ventral vagal complex. This is a social engagement system, the system of safety and connection. When ventral vagal activation is strong, heart rate varies in response to breath phase, and voice become expressive. You feel both calm and alert, curious and open. This is the biological state of trust. Here's what's crucial. You cannot access higher cognitive functions, creativity, complex problem solving, empathy, intuition, from sympathetic or dorsal states. You can only access them from ventral vagal activation, which means trust is not just emotionally pleasant, it's neurologically necessary for your highest human capacities. Most people in modern culture live primarily in sympathetic activation, chronic low-level fight or flight, always doing, always planning, always busy, always slightly anxious. They dip occasionally into dorsal collapse, the Sunday crash, the illness that forces rest, the depression that stops forward motion, and they taste ventral, vagal moments, laughter with friends, creative flow moments of awe in nature, but don't know how to sustain them. This is why psychology for sleep is actually psychology for life. Sleep becomes impossible when your nervous system won't shift out of sympathetic activation. But learning to access ventral vagal states transforms not just your sleep, but your entire existence. So, what activates the ventral vagal system? What tells your body it's safe to trust? First, slow exhalation. The vagus nerve runs through your diaphragm, and when you extend your exhale, making it longer than your inhale, you directly stimulate ventral vagal tone. This is why every spiritual tradition includes breath practice. They discovered empirically what science now confirms: breath is the bridge between voluntary and involuntary nervous system function. Second, social connection, but specifically co-regulated connection. When you're with someone whose nervous system is in a trusted state and you attune to him through eye contact, facial expression, vocal tone, your nervous system begins to synchronize with theirs. This is why being around calm people calms you, why therapy works not just through words, but through the regulated presence of the therapist, why community matters for healing. Third, rhythm and pattern music, dance, walking in nature, rocking, swaying. Repetitive rhythmic movement soothes the nervous system, creates predictability, allows the body to relax into pattern. This is why all cultures have music, why mothers instinctively rock babies, why walking helps anxiety. Fourth, safety signals. Being in familiar environments with trusted people, engaging in comfortable rituals. Your nervous system is constantly scanning for safety or threat. When it consistently receives signals of safety, it can shift out of defense. This is why creating sanctuary space in your home matters. Why bedtime rituals support sleep. Why predictable routine soothes anxiety. All of these practices work at the biological level to shift nervous system state. They're not just psychological, they're physiological. This is why thinking yourself into trust doesn't work. You must give your body the actual experiences that allow the shift. Now let us look at what happens in the brain itself when trust deepens. The default mode network is a set of brain regions that activate when you're not focused on external tasks, when you're daydreaming, mind-wandering, engaged in self-reflection. For years, neuroscientists thought this network was just noise, the brain idling. But research now shows the default mode network is crucial for creativity, insight, meaning making, and integration of experience. Here's the significant finding. When people are in chronic control mode, hypervigilant, always planning, never at rest, their default mode network shows less connectivity and less flexibility. They literally cannot access the brain state where insight and creativity emerge. But when people learn to release control to trust, to allow moments of unstructured consciousness, their default mode network becomes more active and more integrated with other brain networks. This is why breakthrough insights come in the shower, or while walking, or just before sleep moments, when you're not trying to solve anything. This is why meditation increases creativity and problem solving. This is why the aha moment arrives when you stop forcing and allow. Your brain works better when you're not strangling it with control. The prefrontal cortex, your brain's executive center responsible for planning, decision making, and impulse control, also functions differently, depending on your relationship with trust. In states of chronic stress and control, the prefrontal cortex becomes rigid, favoring familiar patterns even when they're not working, unable to innovate or adapt. But in trusted states, the prefrontal cortex maintains flexibility, can shift strategies, can tolerate ambiguity, while working toward resolution. And the amygdala, often called the brain's alarm system, though it's more complex than that, literally shrinks with mindfulness and trust practice. Brain scans of long-term meditators show reduced amygdala volume and reduced amygdala reactivity. This doesn't mean they're naive or unprotected. It means their threat detection system is more accurate, responding to actual danger rather than imagined threat. The biochemistry of trust is equally revealing. When you shift from control to trust, your body's entire hormonal profile changes. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, decreases. Chronic elevated cortisol suppresses. Immune function impairs. Memory increases inflammation, disrupts sleep, and contributes to anxiety and depression. Lowering cortisol through trust practices literally makes you healthier at the cellular level. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, increases. Oxytocin is released during positive social connection, during physical touch, during moments of safety and trust. It promotes feelings of calm connection and well-being. It also increases your capacity to trust further, creating a positive feedback loop. Serotonin, the neurotransmitter associated with mood regulation and well-being, becomes more available. Trust practices increase serotonin production and receptor sensitivity, which is why they work as well as antidepressants for many people with mild to moderate depression. GABA, the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, increases activity. GABA calms neural firing, reduces anxiety, promotes relaxation. This is what anti-anxiety medications target, but you can increase GABA naturally through practices that cultivate trust. And dopamine associated with motivation and reward finds better balance. Chronic control mode often involves either depleted dopamine burnout, anhedonia, inability to feel pleasure, or dysregulated dopamine addiction to novel stimulation, inability to be present. Trust practices help restore healthy dopamine function, motivation without desperation, pleasure without addiction. All of this is to say, when you learn to trust, you're not just changing your mind, you're changing your brain structure, your nervous system, patterns, your hormone production, your genetic expression. The transformation is total, but these changes don't happen overnight. They require consistent practice, repeated experiences of safety, gradual rewiring of deeply ingrained patterns. This is why psychology for sleep emphasizes regularity, returning night after night to these reflections, allowing the repetition itself to create new neural grooves. Research on individual differences reveals why some people find this work easier than others. Those high in trait neuroticism, a personality dimension characterized by emotional volatility and negative thinking, generally struggle more with trust development. Their baseline nervous system state is more reactive, their threat perception more sensitive, their recovery from stress slower. But neuroticism is not destiny. It simply means more deliberate practice is required. Attachment style, as we discussed earlier, profoundly influences trust capacity. Secure attachment creates nervous systems that can remain regulated under stress, can seek and accept support, can trust appropriately. Insecure attachment patterns create more difficulty. But again, earned secure attachment is possible through therapy, through healthy relationships, through practices that provide consistent safety experiences. Highly sensitive persons, individuals with more reactive nervous systems, deeper processing of stimuli, and stronger emotional responses face particular challenges with trust. Their systems require more safety signals, more gentle titration into vulnerability, more time to integrate experience. But when HSPs develop trust, they often access depths of intuition and empathy unavailable to others. Their sensitivity, once a vulnerability, becomes a gift. The mechanisms by which trust develops are becoming clearer through research. Predictive processing theory suggests that the brain is constantly generating predictions about what will happen next, comparing those predictions to actual experience, and updating its models when predictions fail. When you grow up in an unpredictable or dangerous environment, your brain learns to predict threat and maintain vigilance. But when you repeatedly experience safety, when your predictions of threat consistently fail to manifest, your brain gradually updates its model. Perhaps the brain begins to learn the world is not as dangerous as I've believed. This is why therapy works, why healthy relationships heal, why consistent self-care matters. You're providing repeated experiences that challenge old predictions, allowing new learning at the deepest neurological level. The polyvagal ladder, the framework of moving between dorsal sympathetic and ventral states, offers a map for this journey. You cannot leap from dorsal collapse directly to ventral safety. You must often move through sympathetic activation first. This is why trauma healing is not linear. Why some days you feel worse before you feel better. Why the process requires patience and compassion for the nervous system's actual pace of change. And here we return to Jung's insight. You cannot force transformation. You can only create conditions where transformation becomes possible. Then trust the process. Your nervous system has its own wisdom, its own timing. Your task is not to override it, but to support it. As you rest now, becoming aware of your breath, noticing the quality of activation or relaxation in your body, you're engaging in the most fundamental trust practice presence with what is. Not forcing anything different, not demanding instant change. Simply being with your actual experience with curiosity rather than judgment. This is how neuroplasticity happens through repeated moments of conscious choice to respond differently to familiar patterns. Each time you notice tension and consciously soften. Each time you notice anxious thought and return to breath instead of following the spiral. Each time you notice the urge to control and choose to pause instead. Small moments repeated thousands of times rewire the brain. The research literature on contemplative practices, meditation, mindfulness, yoga, prayer consistently shows these practices create measurable changes in brain structure and function. Gray matter increases in regions associated with self-awareness, compassion, and emotion regulation. White matter connectivity increases, allowing better communication between different brain regions. The brain becomes more integrated, more flexible, more capable of responding to life's complexity with wisdom rather than reactivity. All of this confirms what mystics have taught for millennia. You are not your thoughts. You are not your conditioning. You are not even your nervous system's habitual patterns. You are the awareness in which all of this arises. And from that awareness, you have choice, not unlimited choice. You cannot simply think away trauma or transcend biology through will, but a real choice about how to work with what is, how to gradually shift patterns, how to cultivate the conditions for healing and growth, and sleep the place where consciousness releases control every night, where the brain consolidates learning and integrates experience, where the body repairs and restores sleep, is both the metaphor and the practice ground for this work. Learning to fall asleep is literally learning to surrender control, learning to trust that consciousness will return, learning to let go of the day and allow the mystery of the night. This is why psychology for sleep is never just about sleep. It's about the fundamental relationship with life itself. Can you trust the process enough to release your grip? Can you allow the natural intelligence of your organism to do what it knows how to do? Can you stop interfering with your own healing? The neuroscience says, yes, you can. Your brain wants to move toward health. Your nervous system wants to regulate. Your body wants to heal. But you must stop fighting these natural processes with control and force. You must learn to cooperate with your own biology rather than override it. And yet, and here we must be very honest, knowing all of this intellectually does not automatically create change. Understanding the neuroscience of trust does not make you trusting. Reading about nervous system regulation does not regulate your nervous system. The information prepares you, but the transformation requires something more. It requires facing yourself. It requires honest examination of the ways you're still grasping, still controlling, still refusing to truly surrender. It requires the courage to see your own patterns without the comfortable distance of academic understanding. Which brings us to the final pillar of this journey, the direct challenge, the confrontation, the invitation to actually do the work, rather than just understand it. This is where Jung's teaching becomes most demanding, most necessary, and most transformative. Are you ready? Because we're about to get uncomfortably honest about what's actually been happening. As you listen to these gentle words while still holding tension in your body, still planning tomorrow, still not quite trusting, even as you hear about trust. Let us enter the crucible of real transformation now. You're still doing it, aren't you? Listening to all this beautiful wisdom about trust and surrender, nodding along, appreciating the ideas while your jaw stays tight, your shoulders remain raised, your belly holds its armor, planning tomorrow even as you lie here, mentally organizing, problem solving, controlling. You tell yourself you're just being responsible. You tell yourself someone has to think ahead. Someone has to make sure things work out. Someone has to hold it all together. But Jung would call this what it actually is, the ego's desperate, exhausting, ultimately futile attempt to avoid facing the unconscious. Because here's what you haven't wanted to admit. The planning isn't helping. The controlling isn't working. The constant vigilance isn't keeping you safe. It's killing you slowly, one tense moment at a time. Your anxiety isn't the problem. It's the symptom of the real problem, your refusal to trust anything larger than your own will. Let's be brutally honest about the pattern you're living. Every day you wake up, already planning, already thinking 3 steps ahead, already bracing for what might go wrong. You check your phone before you fully opened your eyes, scanning for crises, for demands, for confirmation that, yes, everything still requires your constant management. You make lists. You contingency plan. You try to predict every possible outcome and prepare for each one. And how's that working for you? Really, let's assess honestly. Has all this planning prevented disappointment? Has all this control created the safety you seek? Has all this vigilance protected you from life's inevitable difficulties? Or has it just made you exhausted, disconnected, and so busy defending against imagined futures that you miss the actual present? You've turned your life into a project to be managed rather than an experience to be lived. You've become the CEO of your own existence, constantly strategizing, optimizing, measuring, adjusting. You attend the meeting of your morning routine. You execute the agenda of your workday. You manage the logistics of your relationships. You review the metrics of your self-improvement. But when exactly do you actually live? When do you simply exist without the overlay of management? At work, you overfunction. You know you do. You check other people's work because you don't trust they did it right. You volunteer for more than you can handle because saying no might mean loss of control, might mean someone thinks you're not capable, might mean missing something important. You stay late, arrive early, answer emails at midnight. Not because the work demands it, because your anxiety demands it. Your worth feels tied to your productivity. Your value feels tied to your usefulness. Your right to exist feels tied to your constant doing. Notice how exhausting just reading that is. Now multiply it by every day you've been living this way. The cumulative toll is staggering. Your nervous system wasn't designed for constant activation. Your body wasn't designed to treat every email like a life or death situation. Your mind wasn't designed to hold contingency plans for contingencies of contingencies. In relationships, you manage people. You've probably never thought of it that way. You think you're being thoughtful, helpful, considerate, but really you're managing. You try to guide conversations towards safe topics because conflict makes you anxious, and you cannot trust that the relationship will survive disagreement. You say what you think others want to hear, rather than what you actually think and feel, because authenticity feels too risky, too uncontrolled. You perform understanding while feeling increasingly alone, because performing connection is not the same as having connection. You cannot simply be with another person. You must make sure the interaction goes well, which means you're never actually present. You're always monitoring their response, adjusting your behavior, checking for signs of disapproval or disconnection. You're in the conversation, but also above it, managing it, controlling it, trying to ensure the outcome you want. And then you wonder why intimacy eludes you, why you feel lonely even with people who love you. Here's the painful truth. People can feel your management. They can sense that you're not really with them. You're with your idea of how the interaction should go. They can feel your anxiety about their response. They can sense your performance. And it makes them careful around you, which makes you feel more unsafe, which increases your controlling behavior, which creates more distance, which confirms your belief that people can't be trusted. The cycle perpetuates itself, and you never see that you're creating the very thing you fear. Alone, you scroll endlessly through your phone, seeking something to grasp onto some information that will finally make you feel prepared enough, certain enough, safe enough. You read news not to be informed, but to feel like you know what's coming, like you can prepare for disasters, like knowledge will protect you. You check social media not for connection, but to monitor how you're perceived, to make sure no one is angry with you, to compare your life to others, and adjust your performance accordingly. You plan tomorrow in obsessive detail: what you'll wear, what you'll say, how you'll handle various scenarios. You review today, replaying conversations, analyzing your performance, rehearsing what you should have said differently. You write mental scripts for future conflicts that may never happen, creating elaborate dialogues in your head where you finally say the perfect thing, where you're finally understood, where you finally get the validation you crave. And at night, at night, you bring all of this to bed with you. You lie down exhausted, but cannot rest, because to rest is to release control, and you've forgotten how to do that. Your body is ready for sleep, but your mind won't let it happen. One more thing to plan, one more worry to solve, one more scenario to prepare for, just in case. Always just in case. So you listen to content like this, hoping it will finally give you permission to let go, hoping for some technique or insight that will magically allow surrender without you actually having to do the surrendering. You want the benefits of trust without the terror of trust. You want the peace of surrender without the vulnerability of surrender. You want transformation without change. But that's not how this works. You cannot think your way into trust. You cannot control your way into surrender. You cannot plan your way into presence. The very attempt is the problem. This is what Jung called living in the attic, spending all your time in the narrow conscious mind, never descending into the deeper rooms of the psyche where real wisdom waits. You've turned yourself into a control machine, and you're suffering terribly from it, but you're still not willing to power down. Why? Because the alternative terrifies you. If you stop controlling, who will make sure things work out? If you stop planning, won't chaos emerge? If you stop being vigilant, won't danger arrive? If you trust the unconscious, won't it betray you? Better to stay exhausted and anxious than to face the unknown that waits in release. Better the suffering you know than the uncertainty you don't. This is the ego's logic, and it makes perfect sense if you are the ego. But you are not just the ego. You are also the self, that deeper organizing center that already knows more than your conscious mind knows, that has been trying to speak to you through dreams and symptoms and synchronicities you've been too busy to notice. Your depression is not just chemical, it's your psyche's way of forcing you to stop. Your anxiety is not just irrational fear, it's your system's alarm that you're living against your true nature. Your insomnia is not just a sleep disorder, it's your unconscious refusing to cooperate with a life built on false premises. Your body is not betraying you with these symptoms. Your body is trying to save you, but you treat the symptoms as the enemy and try to control them too. You take supplements to force sleep, rather than examining why you can't surrender. You use anxiety medication to function in a life that's making you sick, rather than questioning why that life requires medication. You manage your depression with techniques rather than asking what your depression is trying to tell you about how you're living. Let's look at what's actually happening beneath your conscious awareness. The part of you that insists on control, where did it come from? Almost certainly, it arose as a brilliant adaptation to circumstances where the world genuinely wasn't safe. Maybe your childhood was unpredictable. Maybe parents were unreliable, emotionally volatile, or absent. Maybe you were hurt in ways that taught you people cannot be trusted. Only vigilance keeps you safe. Maybe you learned early that love was conditional on performance, that you had to earn your right to exist through achievement and usefulness, that who you actually were wasn't acceptable. These patterns made sense once. They protected you. They got you through situations that might have broken you. Your controlling self deserves gratitude, not condemnation. It kept you alive. It helped you survive circumstances a child shouldn't have had to survive. It was intelligent, adaptive, necessary. But here's what your ego doesn't want to admit. Those circumstances have changed. You are not that child anymore. The danger that was once real is no longer present, but the defense against it remains running, constantly exhausting you, preventing you from actually living the life you've worked so hard to protect. This is the tragedy of unexamined psychological patterns. What once saved you now imprisons you. The very strategy that got you through childhood now prevents you from experiencing intimacy, joy, spontaneity, rest. You're still fighting a war that ended years ago. You're still defending against threats that no longer exist. You're still that vigilant child inside trying to survive, not realizing that survival is no longer the question. The question now is how to live. And the culture around you reinforces this dysfunction. Capitalism needs your anxiety. Anxious people are productive workers and eager consumers. Advertising exists to make you feel incomplete, so you'll buy solutions. Social media is engineered to keep you in comparison and FOMO. The entire economic system depends on you feeling not enough, needing more, constantly striving. You're told to hustle, to grind, to make it happen, to take control of your life. This language is everywhere, and it sounds like empowerment, but it's actually poison. It takes the already anxious mind and adds more pressure, more demand, more need to perform. And then there's the gendered dimension. If you're a woman, you've been trained to people please to manage everyone else's emotions, to make yourself small and accommodating, while still somehow being successful and independent. You must control your appearance, your emotions, your relationships, but never appear controlling. The contradiction alone is exhausting. If you're a man, you've been trained to make things happen, to be strong and certain, and never admit doubt or fear. You must control outcomes. Project confidence succeed, but never acknowledge the anxiety beneath the performance. You're given permission to be angry, but not sad, dominant, but not vulnerable. So you channel everything into doing, achieving, controlling, while your actual emotional life atrophies. These are not personal failings. These are cultural conditioning so deep it feels like nature. But they're not nature. They're learned patterns, which means they can be unlearned. But unlearning requires seeing them clearly. And seeing them clearly requires the courage to stop defending your ego's survival strategy long enough to question it. So, let's do that now. Let's engage in some actual Jungian shadow work, not as theory, but as direct examination. Jung taught that the shadow contains everything the ego has disowned: qualities, impulses, truths about yourself that don't fit your self image. The shadow is not evil, it's just unconscious. And it runs your life precisely because it's unconscious. What you don't acknowledge in yourself, you project onto others, and the world creating the very experiences you're trying to avoid. So here's your invitation. What are you controlling in the outer world that reflects what you won't face in your inner world? If you're constantly trying to control other people's perception of you, what truth about yourself are you refusing to accept? If you're obsessed with financial security, what insecurity are you avoiding feeling? If you micromanage your environment, what inner chaos are you afraid to meet? If you plan every moment, what spontaneous impulse might emerge if you didn't? Every area where you grip tightly points to something in your shadow. The tighter the grip, the more unconscious material is there. This is not judgment. This is map reading. Your symptoms show you where the work is. And projection Jung's teaching that whatever disturbs you in others is usually something unintegrated in yourself. This is perhaps the most confronting shadow work. Every person you judge as irresponsible or careless or reckless likely carries a quality you've exiled in yourself. The spontaneity you cannot allow yourself, you condemn in others. The trust you cannot access, you call naivete when you see it. The authentic expression you've suppressed, you dismiss as attention-seeking when others do it. This is uncomfortable to face. Your ego will resist it, will find exceptions, will argue why your judgments are actually just accurate observations. But try this. For 1 week, every time you judge someone, ask yourself, what disowned part of me is this person carrying? The answer won't always be obvious, but asking the question begins to crack open the projection mechanism. And then there's persona, the mask you wear to interface with the world. Everyone has persona, and healthy persona is necessary. But many of us have become so identified with our persona that we've lost touch with what's real underneath. You perform competence while feeling like an imposter. You smile while raging inside. You present certainty while drowning in doubt. The question Jung asks is devastating. Who would you be without their approval? If nobody was watching, if nobody's opinion mattered, if you had no reputation to maintain, who would you actually be? What would you actually do? What would you actually want? Most people cannot answer this without anxiety, because they've lived so long for others' expectations that they no longer know their own truth. The authentic self got buried so deep under the persona that it's almost inaccessible. But it's not dead. It's just waiting. Waiting for you to get quiet enough, honest enough, brave enough to hear it. Listen, right now beneath all your planning and controlling and performing, there's a voice. You've heard it in the shower when your guard drops for a moment, driving when the mind drifts, just before sleep when consciousness loosens its grip. It whispers what you actually want, what's actually true, what actually matters. But it only speaks when you stop demanding answers. It only emerges when you create space. It cannot shout over your ego's constant noise, so you miss it. And then you wonder why life feels empty despite your accomplishments, why you feel disconnected. despite your friendships, why you feel lost, despite your plans. Jung's promise, and it is both promise and warning, is that if you turn toward this voice, if you learn to trust it more than your ego's certainty, your entire life will transform. But the transformation will not look like what your ego wants. It will be stranger, more difficult, more real. The path of individuation Jung taught is the path of becoming who you truly are, rather than who you've been conditioned to be. And this path requires dismantling the false self you've carefully constructed, which feels like dying. Because in a very real sense, it is dying. The you that you've been, the performance, the persona, the controlled identity must die for the authentic self to emerge. This is why Jung quoted the alchemical maxim, "No new birth without death." You cannot become whole while still clinging to the fragments. You cannot become authentic while still performing. You cannot individuate while still living for others' approval. And this path is lonely. This is perhaps the hardest truth. When you stop performing, some people will be confused or disappointed. When you stop over-functioning, some people will be angry. When you start saying no, setting boundaries, prioritizing your actual needs, you will lose relationships you thought were solid. Because those relationships were based on your performance of a role, not on who you actually are. Jung never promised that the authentic life would be comfortable. He promised it would be real. He promised you would feel alive in a way you'd forgotten was possible. He promised meaning would emerge from living your truth, rather than chasing external validation. But he never promised it would be easy. Most people turn back. They taste the difficulty of individuation, the loneliness, the uncertainty, and they retreat to the comfort of the controlled life. Better to be anxious and accepted than authentic and alone. This is understandable. This is human. But it is also tragic because you are trading your life for a simulation of a life, and some part of you will always know it. So here's the confrontation. Are you actually willing to do this work? Or are you just consuming content about transformation while staying safely unchanged? Are you willing to stop controlling long enough to feel the terror underneath the control? Are you willing to acknowledge that you don't actually know what will happen and sit with that not knowing? Are you willing to hear what your actual self wants, even if it contradicts everything you've built? Are you willing to disappoint people? Are you willing to be misunderstood? Are you willing to look foolish? Are you willing to fail? Because if you're not willing to risk these things, then no amount of understanding will change you. You'll collect beautiful insights about trust and surrender while still gripping tightly to the life you know. You'll listen to content about psychology for sleep while still lying awake planning. You'll admire spiritual teaching while remaining defended against direct experience. Jung is not kind about this. He wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." He saw how humans construct elaborate spiritual systems, psychological theories, religious practices, all to avoid the simple, terrifying act of becoming real. You don't need more information. You don't need better techniques. You don't need a new approach to trust. You need to actually surrender, which means releasing the grip right now in this moment, in your actual body, with your actual breath, regardless of what fear arises. So let's do it together, right now, not tomorrow, not after you've prepared more. Now, feel the tension in your body. Don't analyze it, just feel it. Notice where you're holding your jaw, your shoulders, your belly, your hands. This tension is control crystallized into muscle. It's the body's manifestation of the ego's grip. Now, without forcing, without making it happen, simply allow the next exhale to release slightly more than usual. Not a huge breath, just a little more letting go. And notice what happens when you soften even slightly. What fear begins to arise. What voice says, not safe, must stay vigilant. This voice is real. It's trying to protect you. But ask it gently, what are you protecting me from right now in this actual moment? Not in imagination, not in tomorrow's potential disaster right now. In this bed, in this darkness, in this safety. Likely the answer is nothing. Right now, in this actual moment, you are safe. The danger is imagined, projected, remembered from the past, or feared in the future, but not present. And yet you're defending against it as though it were real, which keeps you in perpetual tension. This is the practice return to now, again and again. Not to force trust, but to recognize when you're living in fantasy danger rather than present reality. 90% of your anxiety is about things that aren't happening. This is not to minimize real challenges. It's to show you how much energy you waste on imaginary ones. Jung taught that dreams are the unconscious mind's attempts to communicate with consciousness, to show you what you're not seeing, to guide individuation. But most people ignore their dreams or treat them as random noise. If you actually want to develop trust in the self, start honoring what the self is already trying to tell you. Keep a dream journal. Write your dreams immediately upon waking, before the rational mind dismisses them. Don't interpret them immediately, just record them. Over time, patterns emerge. Repeated symbols, recurring themes, messages from the deeper layers of your psyche. And pay attention to synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences Jung discovered. When you think of someone and they call. When you need information and the right book appears. When doors close and new doors open. The ego dismisses these as random, but the self recognizes them as language, as guidance, as confirmation that you're part of a larger intelligent pattern. But synchronicity only becomes visible when you release control enough to notice it. When you're gripping tightly, forcing your agenda, you miss the subtle signs and opportunities that emerge from allowing. Life is always speaking. You're just too busy talking over it to hear. The integration Jung points toward is not comfortable. It includes your shadow, your contradictions, your imperfections. It means admitting you're both generous and selfish, loving and hateful, wise and foolish. It means embracing the full complexity of being human, rather than maintaining the simplified story of who you're supposed to be. And relationships become completely different when you stop performing. Most connections are transactions. I'll play this role if you play that one. I'll meet your expectations if you meet mine. These aren't relationships, they're contracts, and they're exhausting. But when you do your own inner work, when you individuate, when you become real, you start attracting others who've done the same. And the quality of connection is entirely different. Two people who've met their own shadows don't need to project onto each other. Two people who've individuated don't need to complete each other. They can meet as whole beings choosing to share life, rather than using each other to fill emptiness. This is rare. This is precious. This is what makes the difficult journey worth it, not just for yourself, but for the quality of love that becomes possible. But you must walk through the fire first. You must face what you have been avoiding. You must feel what you've been numbing. You must acknowledge what you've been denying. There is no bypass, no shortcut, no way to skip the descent. And yet, and here is the promise that makes it bearable, you are not doing this alone. The self is already there, waiting in the darkness, has been there all along. Your task is not to create something new, but to remove the obstacles to what already is. You're not building trust from scratch. You're removing the defenses that block the trust that's natural to life itself. Everything is working out for you. Not because the universe is magically making your wishes come true, but because when you align with the intelligence that moves through all of life, you begin to cooperate with its unfolding rather than fight it. You become a participant in the process rather than a victim of chaos. This doesn't mean nothing bad will happen. It means you develop the capacity to meet what happens without collapsing or defending. It means difficulties become opportunities for growth rather than catastrophes to avoid. It means you discover a resilience you didn't know you had because it emerges from connection to something larger than your individual will. Jung called this the self. Others call it the Tao God, the universe, the ground of being. The name matters less than the recognition. You are part of something infinitely vaster than your ego's concerns. And this vastness is intelligent, purposeful, and ultimately benevolent. Not in the sense that it prevents suffering, but in the sense that it includes suffering within a larger pattern of meaning. When you begin to trust this, not as belief, but as lived experience, everything shifts. Anxiety doesn't disappear, but it stops running your life. Control doesn't vanish, but it becomes appropriate rather than compulsive. Planning continues, but from a different place, responsive rather than defended. And sleep, the surrender we practice every night, becomes effortless again as it was in childhood, before you learn to fear the loss of consciousness. You remember that letting go is not death, but trust. You remember that consciousness returns. You remember that you are held by something much larger than your understanding. This is the promise. This is the invitation. This is the challenge Jung offers. Live truly, die to the false, trust the real. Not someday, not after you figured it all out. Now, in this breath, in this release, in this moment of choosing authenticity over performance, vulnerability over control, being overdoing. Are you ready? Because the work is not out there, it's here. Not tomorrow, it's now. Not in understanding, it's in doing. In actually releasing the grip you're still holding, in trusting that it's safe to let go, even when you cannot see the outcome. This is where theory becomes practice, where knowledge becomes wisdom, where listening becomes living, and everything, absolutely everything, is working out for you. Return with me now to that quiet lake at dawn, the mist still rising, the water still resting, the threshold between darkness and light still suspended in perfect stillness. But you are different now. You've walked through these chambers of understanding, psychological, archetypal, neurobiological, deeply personal. You've heard the teaching from multiple angles, multiple voices, multiple traditions, all pointed toward the same truth. The water reflects the sky perfectly because it doesn't try to be anything other than what it is. The trees stand rooted in earth they cannot see, trusting what they've never questioned. The birds that begin their morning song don't doubt they'll find food today. They sing anyway, from sheer aliveness, from trust, so fundamental it doesn't even register as trust. This is what we've forgotten and what we're remembering together tonight. Trust is not something you achieve, it's something you remember. It's the natural state of consciousness before it learned to defend itself. It's what remains when you stop fighting life's unfolding. We explored how trust functions psychologically, how it lives in your nervous system, how it was shaped by early experience, how it can be cultivated through practice. We saw that anxiety is not your enemy, but your teacher, showing you where you're still gripping, still refusing to allow, still at war with what is. Your symptoms are not problems to eliminate, but messages to decode. Your body's refusal to relax is not betrayal, but wisdom, holding the tension you won't consciously acknowledge. The research confirms what contemplatives have always known: your brain is plastic changeable, capable of rewiring even deeply ingrained patterns. But this rewiring happens not through force, but through repeated, gentle experiences of safety. Like water wearing stone, like seeds splitting concrete, transformation happens through persistence, not violence. Each moment you choose to soften rather than tighten. Each time you notice tension and consciously release each breath that extends the exhale. These small acts accumulate into profound change. We discovered the archetypal dimension, how every culture and mythology contains these same patterns of descent: surrender, death, and rebirth. How Inanna must be stripped at each gate, losing crown and robe, and measuring rod standing finally naked before the truth of herself. How Jonah must be swallowed, sitting in darkness until he stops running and accepts his calling. How the fool must step off the cliff, trusting the ground will meet him, even though he cannot see it. These are not quaint old stories. They are maps of psychological transformation, and you are living them, whether you recognize it or not. Right now in your life, these patterns are active. You are being called to descend into parts of yourself you've avoided. You are being asked to release identities and securities you thought you needed. You are standing at cliffs, deciding whether to step into uncertainty or retreat to the familiar suffering you know. The stories teach us that this is not pathology. This is the human journey. Everyone who becomes real must pass through these gates. Everyone who individuates must face their shadow, release their persona, trust the unconscious. You are not broken for struggling with this. You are engaged in the most important work. A human being can do the work of becoming who you actually are, rather than who you were conditioned to be. We examined the neuroscience, how your brain actually changes when you learn to trust how your nervous system settles from sympathetic activation into ventral vagal safety, how your biochemistry shifts from defense to receptivity. We saw that this is not just spiritual philosophy, it's biological fact. Your body is designed to trust when given the conditions that allow it. Your brain wants to move toward health. Your nervous system wants to regulate. You're not fighting against your nature. You're fighting against learned patterns that override your nature. The polyvagal ladder showed us that healing is not linear. You cannot leap from dorsal shutdown directly to ventral safety. You must often move through sympathetic activation, the mobilization of fight or flight, before you can settle into peace. This is why trauma healing brings up difficulty before it brings relief. Why some days you feel worse after therapy, or meditation, or honest conversation. The system is thawing, and thawing hurts. But the alternative, staying frozen, hurts more in ways that deaden you to life itself. We saw how trust capacity develops across the lifespan, how early attachment shapes but doesn't determine your adult patterns, how earned, secure attachment is possible through consistent experiences of safety, how neuroplasticity means you can change your brain's default settings through practice. The child you were learned distrust for good reasons. The adult you are can learn trust for better reasons. This is the promise of developmental psychology. It's never too late to have a different experience, to build new neural pathways, to teach your nervous system that the world has more safety in it than your history suggested. And we face the Jungian challenge, the direct confrontation with your own patterns of control, your shadow, your persona, your refusal to actually do the work while remaining comfortable consuming content about the work. We acknowledge the difficulty, the loneliness, the risk, and also the promise of authentic life that waits on the other side. This confrontation was necessary because intellectual understanding, while valuable, changes nothing by itself. You can study trust for years and still grip tightly. You can appreciate surrender philosophically while defending against it experientially. The gap between knowing and doing is vast, and it can only be crossed through direct practice, through actual moments of releasing control, despite the fear that arises. Jung was unflinching about this. He saw how people construct elaborate spiritual systems, psychological theories, religious practices, all to avoid the simple, terrifying act of becoming real. He saw how the ego will do anything to maintain its illusion of control, including adopting the language of surrender while still gripping underneath. This is why he insisted on dream work, on active imagination, on engaging the unconscious directly, rather than just talking about it. Theory is preparation, but practice is transformation. And what is the practice? It's simpler than you think, though not easier. The practice is noticing when you're gripping and choosing to soften. Noticing when you're planning the next moment and choosing to be in this moment. Noticing when you're controlling and choosing to allow. Again and again and again, thousands of times, until softening becomes more familiar, then gripping, until presence becomes more comfortable, then planning, until allowing becomes more natural, then controlling. This has been psychology for sleep at its deepest level, not techniques to quiet your mind for a few hours, but invitation into a different relationship with life itself. The sleep you're moving toward is not just tonight's rest, but the larger release of the controlling ego's grip on your existence. Every night you practice this, you lie down, you release consciousness, you trust that you'll return in the morning. You've been practicing surrender your whole life, every single night, but doing it unconsciously. What happens when you bring consciousness to this practice? What happens when you recognize that the nightly release of control is training for the daily release of control? And here is what you can trust, what has been true throughout this entire exploration. What remains true whether you believe it or not. The dawn comes, whether you worry it into being or not. The mist rises through its own nature, not through force or planning. The seasons turn without your management. The earth breathes without your instruction. Life unfolds according to an intelligence so vast your conscious mind cannot comprehend it. Yet, you are part of this intelligence, made of it, held by it, guided by it when you stop interfering. Consider the enormity of what happens in your body without your conscious control. Your heart beats, has beaten billions of times since you were born, will beat billions more times before you die, and you've never had to remember to make it beat. Your lungs breathe roughly 20,000 times each day, adjusting oxygen levels, filtering air, maintaining the delicate balance that keeps you alive, and you've never had to manage it. Your cells regenerate. You have an entirely new stomach, lining every few days, new skin every month, new bones every few years. Your immune system fights off thousands of threats daily without your awareness or instruction. Your dreams process the day's experiences, integrating them into memory and meaning while you sleep. All of this happens not despite your lack of control, but because of it. Your conscious mind could never manage this complexity. If you had to remember to beat your heart, you'd be dead within minutes. The intelligence that runs your body is infinitely more sophisticated than your thinking mind, and it operates entirely on trust. Trust in the process, in the pattern, in the intelligence inherent in life itself. Now expand this recognition beyond your body to your life. What if the same intelligence that orchestrates your heartbeat and breath and cellular regeneration is also orchestrating the larger patterns of your existence? What if the synchronicities, the meaningful coincidences, the doors closing and opening, the people arriving at just the right moment? What if these are not random, but part of the same intelligent unfolding? You don't need to believe this. You just need to stop disbelieving it long enough to actually experience it. The evidence is everywhere in the way your body heals without your conscious direction, in the way your heart beats without your instruction, in the way life continuously resurrects itself from apparent death, in the way meaning emerges from chaos, in the way love finds you, despite your defenses, in the way your life has unfolded so far, despite all the things you didn't control. Think about it honestly. How many of the best things in your life came from your planning? Your most important relationships, did you control those into being? Or did they arrive through chance encounter, unexpected connection, synchronistic meeting? Your most significant insights, did you think your way to them? Or did they come unbidden in moments of not trying? Your greatest creative work, did you force it? Or did it flow when you got out of your own way? Control has its place. Planning serves certain functions, but the illusion that control creates your life, this is what causes suffering. What actually creates your life is the combination of your intention with life's intelligence, your effort with life's grace, your conscious choice with unconscious guidance. This is the dance, the partnership, the co-creation that happens when you stop trying to do it all alone. May you find moments of genuine surrender in the small things. The breath you didn't force the plan. You didn't make the moment you allowed yourself to simply be without performing or protecting. May these small moments teach your nervous system what your mind has been learning. It is safe to release, safe to trust, safe to allow life to move through you rather than demanding you control it. Tomorrow, you'll face the same challenges, the same triggers, the same invitations to grip and control. But perhaps having spent this time in exploration, you'll notice the grip a moment sooner. You'll recognize the controlling before it takes over completely. You'll remember that you have choice, not unlimited choice, not power over outcomes, but real choice about whether to tighten or soften, fight or allow grip or trust. And that choice made thousands of times across thousands of days creates a different life. Not a life without difficulty. Trust doesn't prevent challenges, but a life lived with grace, with resilience, with the deep knowing that you are held by something larger than yourself, and that holding is reliable even when invisible. May you encounter your shadow with compassion, recognizing that even your most defended patterns arose from intelligence, from the brilliant survival strategies of a younger self who did what was necessary. May you thank those patterns even as you begin to question whether they still serve you. They deserve honor for the protection they provided, and they deserve release when their time has passed. May you find companions on this path, not people who enable your avoidance, but people who've done their own work, who can meet your authenticity with theirs, who understand that real love is not about completion, but about two whole people choosing to share the journey. These companions are rare but real. They find you when you stop performing, when you become willing to be seen as you actually are, when you trust enough to lower your defenses. May synchronicities begin to reveal themselves not as magic, but as recognition of the intelligence that connects all things, the pattern that was always present, but invisible to your defended consciousness. May you learn to read the signs, trust the guidance, follow the thread of meaning that winds through your life. May you discover that when you stop forcing your agenda, life meets you with offerings more perfect than anything you could have planned. May you sleep tonight and every night with the ease that comes from knowing you are held by something infinitely larger and more intelligent than your anxious ego. May you release the day's grip and allow the mystery of unconsciousness without fear, trusting that consciousness returns, that you are safe in the darkness, that transformation happens in the unknown. May you wake tomorrow slightly more yourself, not the performed self, not the defended self, but the authentic self that has been waiting patient and persistent beneath all the strategies, ready to finally live the life you were always meant to live. The lake is still. The dawn arrives. The world turns on its axis. Your breath flows in and out. Your heart beats its faithful rhythm. All of this happens without your management, without your control according to intelligence beyond understanding. You are part of this intelligence. You are held by it. You are safe within it. Everything, absolutely everything is working out for you. Not because you've planned it perfectly, not because you've controlled every variable, but because you are part of a living, intelligent universe that has been unfolding for billions of years according to patterns of increasing complexity, consciousness, and coherence. Trust this. Sleep now. Let go completely. Everything is working out for you. It always has been. It always will be. This is not wishful thinking. This is direct perception of how reality actually operates when you stop fighting it. The journey continues tomorrow. The work deepens over time. The practice becomes more subtle. But for now, just now, release everything. Surrender the day. Surrender the worry. Surrender the need to know. Surrender the illusion of control. You are safe. You are held. You are loved by the intelligence that creates and sustains all things. Rest in this knowing. Sleep in this trust. Wake to a new day from this ground of deeper recognition. Everything is working out for you. Everything is working out for you. Everything is working out for you. This is not affirmation. This is the way things actually are when you align with the deeper current rather than swimming against it. This is what happens when ego's frantic doing softens into self's wise allowing. This is the life that waits on the other side of control's death, more real, more alive, more fully inhabited than anything your defended self could have created. May peace find you. May rest restore you. May trust transform you. May you remember that you have always been held, are being held now, will continue to be held tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after that. May you know yourself as the lake knows itself, reflecting what arrives, holding what descends, allowing what surfaces, trusting the depths you cannot see. Good night.